Take a look at page 710. Okay, so we started yesterday talking about the various what do you call it, the calamities that could befall the Jewish people. Now, just go back to Pasuk Yud Daled for a second. Okay, so it says like this: V'im lo tishma'u if you don't obey me, v'lo tasu es kol hamitzvos ha'elu, and you don't do these mitzvos. Now, yesterday we were talking about, in the beginning, Sunday I think when we started, we spoke about in Bechukotai telechu, talks about being, remember we were talking about the concept of being amel batorah, that you got to work at Torah. The Torah is something that you have to toil in. So he says, V'im lo tishma'u if you do not obey me, and Rashi says, lios amelim batorah, if you do not toil in Torah. So then that triggers off all of the lack of obedience to Torah, and eventually you end up with destruction and the Beis Hamikdash and everything else. The Beis Hamikdash being destroyed. So, again, let's just get this point clear. What is the big deal about working hard at it? What's the big deal about working hard at it? If you don't work hard at Torah, I mean, okay, we learn Torah, but if you don't work hard at Torah, it's going to lead to this, that, the other. Next thing you know, you're going to be intermarrying and everything you're doing all sorts of abominations, destroy the Beis Hamikdash. What is it about working hard at Torah specifically that's just so fundamental, so important, so vital? So what the commentators explain is, a guy told me here once, he knew a girl who was, I think, at Florida State University, who made the United States Olympic swim team. Girl he went to college with. She made the United States Olympic swim team. She was at Florida State University. And he told me that between the ages of 9 and 17, there were 4 days that she had not been in a pool. Now think about that. Between the ages of 9 and 17, there were 4 days that she had not been in a pool swimming. Right? Which tells you, and she didn't even win an Olympic medal, right? But she made the Olympic swim team. Which tells you that if something is worthwhile, there's only one way to achieve it. You got to work at it. If you don't work at it, it means that it's just not that important to you. Because when it is important to you, you work really hard at it. So if a guy is trying to make money and he's working hard because the money's important to him, if Torah is important, we work at it. And if it's not, I had a young lady once came to our house. She was a balas tshuva. When she was 9 years old, her parents sent her, I think she was in New Jersey or New York, her parents sent her, when she was 9 years old, they sent her to Arizona. There was a school in Arizona, a gymnastics school, like the top gymnastics school in the country, which trains American gymnasts. And she was sent to Arizona to train, and the goal was that she's going to become an Olympic gymnast. So she was and she's in a dormitory. At 9 years old, she's in a dormitory. And she's already training, this, that, and the other. And then she was in a competition. When she was 13 years old, she was in a competition, and she fell and she broke her collarbone. So her parents came to see her. Parents came across country. They came to Arizona to see her. She told me when she was in the hospital, and her father walked into the hospital room, and the first thing he said to her was, "Andrea, you've disappointed us." It's the first thing he said to her. So I asked her, I remember at the time she was already married, she was at my Shabbos table. I said to her, "What kind of relationship do you have with your wife?" She says, "Strained." I just heard her nodding her head and say, "Strained." But because that's what it takes. That's what it takes. If it's important to you, you're going to work at it. And if you don't work at it, you're not going to achieve it. So if a person does not work at Torah, that demonstration, it's just not that important to you. It's just not that important to you. That's why the Amel B'Torah is so important. Now, if you continue on, so yesterday we spoke about the Behola, about anxiety, okay? And then you're going to run away from your enemies. Your enemies are going to chase you, and I will give you 7 forms of punishment. Now, take a look.
I just read an article about anxiety, how it's passed down from your parents. And they did a study with twins, and it directly correlates that it gets passed down from your parents.
It gets passed down from the parents. These things are difficult to know exactly how it works, because if your parents are anxious, they made you a nervous wreck. So it's difficult to know how much is nature and nurture, that sort of thing. They did have an incident in the United States once, back in, I think this is in the late 70s. There was a guy came at the end of semester break. Guy came to university, somewhere like Penn State, one of these things. It was the end of semester break, and some girl walks over to him, and she says, "Hi, Tom. How was your vacation?" And he looks at her with a blank look on his face. She goes, Tom, how's your vacation? He goes, my name is not Tom, my name is Rick. He's like, come on, stop messing around. Tom, how's your vacation? He says, I don't know what you're talking about. Aren't you Tom Ramsey? He goes, no, my name is Rick Smith. And she thought he was playing around. She said, just stay here. And she said to somebody, go get Tom. They brought Tom over, and these two guys looked identical, absolutely. I remember seeing the picture. They both had curly, like kind of a curly little afros and curly hair. And it turned out they did a check on them. They were identical twins who had been split up at birth. And they happened to find each other on the campus. And the sociologists went wild with this, checking. And it turned out that both of them, their favorite day of the week was Wednesday, their favorite color was green, and their favorite food was, a salami sandwich with onions and just a drop of mustard. They found that. But then they had different interests. The sociologists were going out. Then the next day they found the third brother. There was a third brother in Texas. Right? He already, also, certain things were similar. And certain things were different. He had been in jail, So I just remember. I remember he had some issues. He had some issues with the law. I remember a guy came to play. A guy was drafted by the Chicago Bears, and there was some hesitation drafting him because as the team spokesman said, he's got some legal issues. That was legal issues in the form of white powder and as such. So I just remember. But the sociologists went wild with these three. This was like a sociologist's dream. Twins separated from birth. Now what's the same? What's similar? What's same? And each one, their favorite sport was badminton. And they were dating a girl named Carol. And each one was to turn out the same girl, so they shot each other. But each one was, the sociologists had a field day with it. So it's difficult to know. Anxious parents, anxious kids, that sort of thing. But that's what Torah says. Now, take a look at some of these calamities. Let's go to a bigger subject for a second. Somebody says to you, why did the Holocaust happen? Anybody brave? Why did the Holocaust happen? What would your answer be? Anybody brave? Yeah.
I would say that the Holocaust maybe happened because...
Not maybe.
Okay, well then it did happen.
Why?
In my opinion.
Because?
Because Jews weren't living up to what they needed to.
Okay. Are you okay? Anybody else? Why did the Holocaust happen? Anybody?
Hitler told it to happen.
Because what?
Hitler made it happen.
Because Hitler made it happen? Okay, why is that?
His view is that...
What's your view?
Well, I'm saying there's two different points. There's that point, and there's also the point that they were saying that we're the moral compass of the world, and no one liked that.
No one liked that. Okay, good. We're the conscience who are good. Bottom line, why did it happen? Meaning, why did this incident happen to me? A guy loses his money on the stock market. Why did God make this happen? If I say to you, why did God make the Holocaust happen? What's the answer to that? So I'll tell you what I think the answer is. The answer is, I don't know. I'm not a prophet. God didn't tell me. I've got no prophecy. And for me to make a claim that it happened because the Jews were disobedient, how do you know? How do you know? Maybe it was a way because God wanted to pave the way for the Jews to get to the land of Israel. I don't know why God made the Holocaust happen. All I could do is offer an educated guess. I could offer an educated guess. That I could do. I can't tell you for sure because I'm not a Navi yet. I'm not a prophet yet, but I could tell you, I could make an educated guess. My educated guess is, well, let's open up the book of Vayikra, and let's open up the book of Dvarim, both times where it says, what happens when the Jews are disobedient? Then you get all sorts of horrible calamities, and people don't have enough food to eat, and they'll be eating the flesh of their children, and they'll be wiped out. And okay, I don't know. All I know is I do have a source that if I had to lay down money, if it's because what do you call it? If it's because Jews were because they didn't shake their lulav and estroges properly, or if it's because of intermarriage and all sorts of abominations, I would bet on the latter. Why? Because I have a source. If the Torah said, if you don't shake a lulav and estrog properly, the Torah gives a command, take a lulav and estrog. If you don't do it properly, you're going to be surrounded by your enemies, they're going to wipe you out, and so on and so forth. Okay, I don't know. But especially when it says later on that an enemy will come to you and fly like a nesher, like an eagle. Is that creepy? Is that pretty creepy? Torah says that an enemy that will come like an eagle. Then that was the German insignia. German insignia was the eagle. that's a nice little hint. Again, I have to be a prophet to tell you, yeah, this is that. I don't know. But when you look at the calamities over here, you think to yourself, ooh, that's an interesting coincidence. If nothing else, it's an interesting coincidence, okay? Even more than that. Take a look further. Pasuk, go back to Pasuk 15, okay? Back on 7:10, Pasuk 15. So in Pasuk 15 it says like this: V'im bechukotai timoasu, if you loathe my statutes, v'im es mishpatai tigal nafshechem. And how does he translate the bechukim and mishpatim? 15. How does he translate it? If you consider my decrees loathsome, if you reject my ordinances. What's the difference between a chok and a mishpat? Between a decree and an ordinance? What's the difference between one and the other? Chok and a mishpat? Anybody know? What's the difference between a chok and a mishpat?
A decree is like public, it's pro. I think like
No, not in Torah. In Torah we have to do the chokim and the mishpat.
Isn't the hook when you don't fully understand?
Yes.
why you're doing it?
A chok is said to be a mitzvah that doesn't have a rational explanation by human logic. And a mishpat is one that makes a little bit more sense to us. How they categorize them is tricky, because something, for instance, putting on tefillin is a mishpat. I mean, at the end of the day, you come up with all the explanations in the world, doesn't make any sense. Yet it's categorized as a mishpat. So that I would say right off the bat, I don't know exactly where that line, the cutoff line is, because ultimately none of it makes sense. But from a human perspective, but there is that line of choku mishpat. So one of the oldest attacks on Judaism. People say, why should I do this mitzvah? It doesn't make sense. Right? People, it doesn't make any sense to me. A lot of people feel the Torah says don't eat pork. Oh, why not eat pork? Now they have all the cures. They have the cures for the various what do you call it, trichinosis poisoning, whatever it is that you get from pork. Why shouldn't I eat it? Okay, so good. So don't do the ones that don't make sense to you. And what about the ones that do make sense? What about those? How come? I mean, what happened to those? Why is it you throw the whole thing out? So that's what the Torah is getting here. V'im bechukosai timoasu, if you loathe my decrees, the ones that don't make sense. V'im es mishpatai tigal nafshechem, and then you carry on to rejecting the ones that do make sense. You know what's underlying the whole thing? Levilti asosas kol mitzvosai lafrachem is brisi, because you don't want to do any of the mitzvahs. That's with all your logic and all your arguments and all your rationalization. Bottom line is you don't want to do it. That's why you're not doing it. You're coming up with all the fancy arguments and all the fancy rationalizations. And the bottom line is, and I always tell people, don't rationalize. Don't rationalize. Be honest about your motivation. I'll respect you more for your honesty than for the rationalization. So sometimes the guy says, well, guys watching sports on TV. Okay, the guys who watch sports say, well, it's good. It's a mitzvah because it relaxes me. And I mean, save your mitzvahs. Don't tell me you want to do it. Tell me you enjoy sports and you want to watch it, right? If it's the Cubs, it's a mitzvah. Okay, but but other than that, don't tell me it's a mitzvah. Sometimes people try to rationalize. A mother says to a child, "Do a mitzvah, take the garbage." Sometimes a mother says, "Do a mitzvah, take the garbage." Chaim, do a mitzvah, take the garbage. We never spoke to our children like that, and it was a big mistake. My parents never spoke to me that way. If my mother would have said to me, when my father wasn't home, if she would have said to me, "Do a mitzvah, take the garbage," I would have said, Mom, chas v'shalom, if it's a mitzvah, I don't want to take the privilege away from you. If it's a mitzvah, And what you're doing, of course, that's only if my father wasn't home. But if it's a mitzvah, what's your motivation as a mother? At that moment, what's your motivation? Your motivation because you're worried about your kid's mitzvah? Or you need the garbage taken? So you could say to a kid, do me a favor, take the garbage. By the way, you should know it happens to be a mitzvah. But I need you to take the garbage. You understand? Don't talk to kids, because they see right through the motivation. The kid will be confused. I don't understand. If it's a mitzvah, why are you worried about my mitzvahs? Why don't you do the mitzvah? It's a dishonest motivation. So a guy comes along and says, a guy says to me once at Ursa here at Aberdeen, he said, he and another guy want to go to they enjoy going to a bar at night and reviewing the Gemara in a bar. They find it relaxing. Nowhere else to review the Gemara but in a bar, right? They find it relaxing. I mean, why is it relaxing? You can have a couple of beers, a beer with while you learn Baba Kama. I mean, you can also buy beer and bring it into the base and bring it into the yeshiva. No, yeah, well, the bar is a little bit more relaxed. Hey, go give me the buy. Don't say, go give me the business. Tell me you're going to the bar because you want to go to a bar because you want to do the various averas in the bar. And while you're at it, then you have a Gemara. You know, maybe that'll save you. Just be honest. I respect you much more if you're honest. Well, you think you're the first human being that ever came along. In other words, we recognize it. I understand we're human beings with human weaknesses. So a guy comes along and he says, well, the mitzvah doesn't make sense to me, it's not rational, and so on and so forth. All you're going to do is bury yourself in a hole. Come along and say, I have a Yetzer Hara, I'm too lazy, I don't feel like getting up and davening at 7 o'clock in the morning. Just tell me the truth, I respect you for it. I respect you, okay, we're human beings, so you have to work on it. But don't try to then couch it in terms of some sort of rationalization, which we all see through anyway because it's so transparent. So we see through the rationalization. Who are you kidding? Who are you kidding over here? It's like the guy comes over to the rabbi and says, I can't be religious, I got questions. I can't be religious, I got questions. He says, you don't have questions. He says, you can't be religious because you have a Yetzer Hara, not because you have questions. No questions. The questions all have answers. This is how you're not looking for answers. Yeah.
Would it be a valid excuse, like you're doing something, you don't know why you're doing it, so it just feels weird, like you want to learn more about it?
Yes, but while you're...
There's a certain point where you just have to jump in and get your...
Right. Well, you learn about it while you're doing it. Nasa v'nishma. Yes, you should learn about it. To the contrary, the Rambam writes that we have an obligation to try to understand the mitzvahs to the depth that we can. But are you, not you personally, whoever the individual is, but I'm saying somebody not. I'm depersonalizing it because this is a common lament people have. I don't understand it. I mean, the Vilna Gaon did it. So Vilna Gaon seemed to understand it. The Rashba did it. Rashi did it. The Rambam did it. I, the great sophisticated one, don't understand. I mean, honestly, with all due respect, am I the smartest person in the last 1,000 years of Jewish life? Probably not. So I can rely on the smart people that they knew what they were doing. And I'll take their word for it. I can rely on their judgment. And while I'm at it, I'll try to figure out, try to understand it. However, I always make a what do you call it? There's an asterisk here. If you expect to get to the point where you understand everything, quit now. Quit now. Because you won't. Because at the end of the day, with all the fancy explanations, you cannot make me understand why I got to pay $70 for a piece of fruit on Sukkot. Right? So you could explain it's symbolic, and we're sticking a thorn in the eye of the Satan, and a lulav looks like a number 1. We emerge victorious after Yom Kippur. That's beautiful. I could do it with a lemon also. I don't have to go spend $70 on an esrog. So at the end of the day, you could give me all the explanations, but if you want to not understand, there will always be a way to not understand. The way we approach it is just do it. Do it. As you do it, you'll start to understand it. You don't understand it, do it anyway. Do it anyway. Do I understand why we can't eat pork? I don't understand, but pork apparently tastes good, otherwise people would be eating it, right? So I don't understand. I know the Torah is trying to get us to learn a little self-control over here, that we don't grab, we live our life with self-control. Okay, good enough for me, and it was good enough for Rashi, so I'll do it. Right? So you should try to understand, you should try to get to the depth of the mitzvahs. One of the commentaries writes, his terminology is, if a person would live 1,000 years twice, that's how he says 2,000. He says if a person would live 1,000 years, you still would not fathom the depth of even one mitzvah. Because each mitzvah is from God. God's eternal. The mitzvah is eternal. There's eternal depth on each mitzvah. There's eternal depth on each pasuk in the Torah. So we should try. Of course we should try. But that doesn't become a prerequisite. If it's a prerequisite, then you may as well quit now. You may as well quit now because you're never going to get to that point anyway. That's the idea. Okay, let's go on. Take a look at Perek Chaf Zayin now, Pasuk Zayin. Give you a golden piece of advice, gentlemen. You should pay me for this. There's all sorts of calamities over here. And then 27:7. Okay, so over here, the Torah goes, we're out of the calamities now, and the Torah talks about various pledges a person makes. Okay, there's certain pledges you could make. So take a look at the top pasuk on page 718. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe, completely different section. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people. V'amarta aleim, ish ki yafli neder v'erkach hanafashos Hashem. When a man expresses a vow, the person makes a vow, and he decides one day he pledges his value to the Beis Hamikdash. So a guy says, for example, I will pay my value to the Beis Hamikdash. How much are you worth? How much are you worth? So the Torah says, well, v'haya erkecha hazachar, a male, mi ben esrim shana vad ben shishim, from 20 to 60, v'haya erkecha chamishim shekel kesef shekel gosh, 50 shekels, not Israeli shekels, real money. Chamishim shekel b'shekel kesef b'shekel hakodesh. A male between the age of a guy who's 35 and he says, I pledge my value to the Beis Hamikdash. He has to pay 50 shekel. Okay? And then it says if it's a female, the im nekevahi, a female pledges, shloshim shekel, 30 shekel. So the man is a 50 shekel, the woman is a 30 shekel. Okay? 3/5 of the male value. Okay? This isn't the first Dvar Torah you should say when you're on a shidduch, by the way. But you know, when you share a Dvar Torah, want to impress the young lady with your Torah knowledge, I don't know that it's the first Dvar Torah you should tell her. But that's what the Torah says. Then it says, V'imi ben chomesh shana vad ben esrim shana. What if he's between 5 and 20? A father says, I will give the value of my 14-year-old son. For example, V'ayerkacha zochar esrim shkolim, a male is 20. V'lana keva aser shkolim, a woman is 10. And then you could even pledge a baby. V'imi ben chodesh vad ben chomesh shanim, between a month and 5 years old, the guy says, I will give the value of my 2.5-year-old. The haya erkacha zocher chamisha shkalim kesef is 5 shekel. Lana keva erkacha shlosha shkalim kesef. Okay, so the Torah gives you the values over here. Now we'll see in a moment what happens when it's over 60 years old. First question is, what is the deal with pledging? Why should you ever pledge? Guy says, I pledge my value. Why would he ever do that? Why? Just practically, why would a person say, you want to give money? Go give money to the Beis Hamikdash. What do you got to go make pledges for?
The pledge gives the incentive to other people.
Okay, it could be gives the incentive of the people, especially in shul when they're selling aliyahs, that sort of thing. So you pledge, so then it puts a little pressure. Everybody starts pledging. That's certainly true. Certainly true. In the Persian community, certainly true. Right? But what else? What else? Why else should you pledge? Hamsa dedala. Why else? Commitment. Why? In other words, let's say a guy's driving. And he gets into a bang up. The guy doesn't have he's very inspired at that moment, but he doesn't have any money on him. But he wants to make sure that he gives. So at that moment, he pledges. The guy feels he could have died. So he says, I pledge my value to the Beis Hamikdash. Because he's inspired at that moment. The pledge locks you in a situation where you don't necessarily have another option. The pledge locks you in. Okay? Now, that's why a person would pledge. Now take a look at the next pasuk, pasuk Zayin, and this is what we want to focus on. V'imi ben shishim shana v'mala, if he's 60 and on, im zachar, if he's a male, v'haya erkacha chamisha asar shokel. He drops from 50 to 15 after he crosses 60 years old. V'lana keva asar shkolim. She drops from 30 to 10. Who has a higher percentage drop?
The male.
The male. Man, you go from 50 to 15, you've dropped over half, over 30. What was it? 35. How much? That's in percentage. Percentage. How much is? 75%. You've dropped 75%. You've dropped 50 to 15. Whatever the percentage is, she drops 2/3. He drops more than 2/3. He drops more than 2/3. She drops 66%. She goes from 30 to 10. He drops from 50 to 15. He's even more. He drops even more. Very strange. So take a look what Rashi says over here. And this Rashi is a piece of golden advice. V'imi ben shishim shana. It's the right column, 4 lines from the bottom. Kshemagia limea zikna. When you get to senior, what we call senior citizenship, at 60 years old, ha'isha krova lehechashev keish. The woman then closes the gap. She's closer to the man. Ulefichach, and therefore ha'ish poches behizdakno yoser mishlish be'erko. A man drops more than 1/3. The ha'isha ena poches el shlish be'erko. A woman drops exactly 1/3. Now, pay attention. Look inside for one more line here. De amri inshi. People say, Sava bevesa, when there's an old man in the house, pacha bevesa, there's a nuisance in the house. Savta bevesa, when there's an old lady in the house. Sima bevesa, it's a treasure in the house. V'simana tova bevesa, and a good sign in the house. Okay, now this is Rashi just saying this is what people say,
So
and
worthless at all.
not that they're worthless, not that they're worthless, but they're worth less. What that means is as follows. What that means is as follows. A man who's in the house, an older man who's in the house, what does his contribution to the house? Doesn't cook, doesn't bake. When the grandchildren are there, he doesn't change diapers, doesn't burp them, doesn't do anything. What does he do? Once in a while, he takes the grandchild out for a walk. Right? That's what he. Okay. What about the grandmother? She can basically do everything she's always done. She makes soup, and she takes care of the children, and she makes soup, right? And she could tell you the medical remedy. And she burps the baby, and she makes more soup. Right? The grandmother's in the house, and she knows all the things, especially when she's got a daughter who's raising her own children. Mom, what do I do with this one? This one's coughing. This one's got a sore throat. What do I do? What does the father do? Father doesn't do anything. He gets in the way. He traces up the kitchen. That's what he does. He looks around. He looks around for his dentures, and he traces up the kitchen. Anybody see my teeth? Anybody see my teeth? That's all. Or he tells over the same stories over and over. He tells whoever happens to have fall into the trap of coming across the room where he's there, so he nails him. And did I ever tell you the story? The kid's rolling his eyes. Come on, Grandpa, just give me money and forget the stories. And he tells him the story, hoping that he's going to get a $5 out of it. That's what. What does the grandmother do? Okay, so she talks a lot too. That's part of the condition. But at least she could change the baby and help out and cook. Okay. Why is a man in the house, though? Why should an elderly man be in the house? He's retired, doesn't go to work, and he never developed a taste for Torah. Never developed a taste for Torah. A man who decides, you know what? Going to go to Or Sameach. Give Mr. Fogel inspiration to everybody. Comes out of the house, comes to the yeshiva every day. He's one of the yeshiva bachrim. Man stays home. He's a nuisance. He gets in his wife's way. His wife can't wait to see him. But you should know, in all marriages, in the best of marriages, I'm not talking about bad marriages, the best of marriages, a wife feels a sense of relief when her husband leaves in the morning. She loves him, and she loves him when he leaves, and she loves him when he comes home 8 or 10 hours later. There's a famous line. There's a guy who was the director of player operations for the New York Yankees back in the 50s. George Weiss. Now, this George Weiss was a real toughie. And eventually he got fired, and he was hanging around the house for a while. So his wife said, I married George for better or for worse, but I did not marry him for lunch. Right? So that's not the natural way of the world. The natural way of the world is you leave in the morning, you come back at night, you eat supper. That's what you do. And you listen to your wife kvetch. That's not the natural way of the world, because what happens is two people, they have the best marriage. If you hang around each other too long, eventually you turn critical. Eventually you got nothing else to talk about, so you just start saying what else, start giving helpful suggestions. Husband starts making helpful suggestions. Women just love that. And she's happy to see him go. That's what the Torah is telling you. But here the critical thing is, why is he in the home? Why is the man in the home at this point? He's never developed anything else. He was an accountant. He worked his entire life. No, it is his thing. He's got nowhere else to go. He was an accountant his entire life, never developed an outside interest. Now what's he supposed to do? He finally got to retirement age. Maybe he has enough money to retire, whatever. But now what? What's he going to do now? So you have to develop a taste for something that you're going to do. Become a member of the shul, do volunteer work in the shul, go to the old age home, go to shiurim, go learn Torah. Get out of the house. Get out. That's what you have to do. Otherwise, you're a nuisance in the house. You're a nuisance in the house. That's what the Torah is telling you over. It's a golden piece of advice. It's a golden piece of advice. It's absolutely true. If you look around you, you see it's absolutely true. That's the idea. Okay. Huh? Definitely. There you go. You don't have to hear it from me. That's what a person has to do. Okay, we're going to have to stop early today, gentlemen. We'll continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem.